It is your Tuesday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day and hope everyone's having a great day out there as well. Lots of good stuff to get to today. Randy Johnson from the Star Tribune joins me here in just a little bit. Talk Gopher football. It's been a big off-season for them. New quarterback, bunch of new recruits coming in, hosting a bunch more this weekend. Randy will get you caught up on all things Gopher football, all things Gopher football recruiting here in just a little bit. And some NBA draft stuff towards the end of the show. I know we're right in the middle of the finals. I know maybe there's a little bit of a Timberwolves hangover after they lost in the conference finals not so long ago, but draft will be here in a little over 2 weeks. They're splitting it into 2 nights this year, by the way. It is 2 weeks from tomorrow. It starts first round. Second round is the night after that. So Wednesday and Thursday, June 26th and 27th, the NBA draft. Wolves have the 27th and 37th pick. Interesting draft for them. So I just wanted to kind of get into a little bit of what they might be looking for. An ESPN piece kind of caught my eye, got me thinking about it, and maybe you guys can be thinking about it too now that I am. Some PWHL Minnesota thoughts, some interesting night at the PWHL Draft in St. Paul on Monday. Definitely we'll talk more about that on Wednesday's show with Rachel Blount from the Star Tribune, who has covered a lot of that league and a lot of those stories this season. The championship, Natalie Darwitz is ouster as general manager, and now the draft here in St. Paul with a lot of emotions, both good and bad, running hot. First, though, what I miss, let's talk Twins at the jump. They win 5-0 last night over Colorado, first of a 10-game homestand. A lot to like out of this game. Royce Lewis homers in his Target Field debut. Remember, he's been back for quite a while, but all of that was this last road trip against the Yankees and against Pittsburgh. Felt important that the Twins won that final game of that, really rough road trip. They'd gone 0-5 until they beat Pittsburgh in extra innings on Sunday, then able to carry some of that into Monday. A 5-0 win. Like I said, Royce Lewis with the home run. Lots of other good performances up and down the board, but the biggest thing that caught my eye and ear was Chris Paddack, their starting pitcher in this game, who to me really is a bit of a symbol for how this season has gone so far. As Chris Paddack has gone, kind of so have gone the Twins, and he's a bit of a case study of how they've been really, really good against the teams they are supposed to beat, and not so good against not so good is an understatement, not so good, terrible against the teams that are above them, maybe in the standings and in stature. I think I mentioned the other day, 0-14 this season, the Twins are against the 3 best teams in the AL, the Yankees, Baltimore, and Cleveland. That means they're great against the rest of the league, and Chris Paddack kind of follows that pattern. If you look at his ERA for the year, lowered it to 4.79 with a very strong outing. 6+ shutout innings against Colorado last night. 2 disastrous outings this year against the Yankees. 9 innings combined, 12 earned runs in those 2 outings combined. You take out his 2 starts against the Yankees, his ERA is 3.76. Now, you got to pitch to everybody. If you're going to count the games against Colorado, which is way down in the standings, you got to count the games against New York, which is way up in the standings. But it is a point to make that as kind of Chris Paddack has gone, he is kind of a symbol for this team, which has been really good against the teams that have been not so good and really bad against the teams that are really good. Maybe that's not surprising, right? Like, that's kind of how sports work. You beat the teams you're supposed to beat, and then you lose to the teams you're supposed to lose to. It's just that you would like to see them compete at a slightly higher level against those really good teams. Anyway, Paddack had it going on Monday. Here was Rocco Baldelli, his manager, after the game, talking about what he saw from Chris Paddack.
The way the ball's leaving his hand is really, it's different than it was earlier in the year. He looked like he was more staying under control early in the year, but the way that not just the arm, but the whole delivery is kind of working together right now. It looks explosive, and the ball's really flying out, and he still has the same good command. He was able to attack hitters really good. He worked ahead of most of them, and when he didn't, he still, I think, kind of slowed himself down, realized I have to get back in this at bat and continue to make good pitches. His pitches were good today. His fastball really was it looked really effective overall. He mixed through some breaking balls, but the fastball, I mean, looked good.
And to me, Paddack is a bit of the wild card in this rotation, the unknown, right? Coming off of essentially 2 lost seasons from arm troubles, came back at the end of last year, pitched well enough to be a factor in the bullpen in the postseason in particular and down the stretch, and slotted into the rotation this season. High hopes for him, but such an unknown, right? You don't know how many innings you're going to get out of him after basically being shut down for almost 2 full years. You don't know how effective he's going to be, and you need him. They need him. They absolutely need him because, you thought you had a known commodity in Pablo Lopez coming into the season. Pablo Lopez hasn't been nearly as good this year as he was last year, although some of that, too, could be some of what the quality of opponent he's going up against. Joe Ryan has tended to be excellent this year, so you kind of know what you're getting from him. Bailey Ober, you kind of know what he is at this point, even if he's had his ups and downs this season, and probably getting more than they thought they would out of Simeon Woods-Richardson, although they probably would have hoped to get more out of Louis Varland in the 5th spot this year, who, oh, by the way, will pitch tonight, giving the Twins a bit of a reprieve in the rotation, giving everybody a chance to take a day off in the stretch of, I believe, 13 days in a row with scheduled games. So Varland will get another chance tonight. We'll see if he can make the most of it. He's been working on some off-speed pitches at AAA St. Paul, but Paddack is the one who this season they kind of need to bump up, right? Like, if you imagine this team gets to a postseason series, not just a 1-game kind of situation where you're probably going to pitch Pablo Lopez. Let's say they get to a 5-game series this year, and we're a long ways off from that. They got to play more consistently and be better against better teams than they have been so far. But this team has that capability. We thought that about them when the year started. They're starting to get their health back now with Royce Lewis back, everybody else kind of rounding into form. But Chris Paddack, you would like to think he could be a postseason factor or someone who can get you there. He needs to be a little bit better against those really good teams and maintain what he's done. He is kind of the X factor in that rotation. He was excellent last night. If he can be excellent in a lot more games this season, they have a chance. If he pitches like he did against the Yankees in those 2 outings, they do not have a chance. So watch Chris Paddack as he goes. When he's been up, they've been up. When he's been down, they've been down. And that has been the story of the season. Let's shift our attention quickly to the PWHL Draft in St. Paul on Monday night. And like I said, we will talk a lot more about this whole situation, about Natalie Darwitz being out as general manager, the draft itself, the championship recap. It has been a dramatic last few weeks for PWHL Minnesota. We will talk more about that, expecting to on Wednesday's show with Rachel Blount from the Star Tribune. But got to mention what happened last night. They drafted a bunch of players, 7 players. Claire Thompson, number 3 overall to Minnesota. That was their first pick. Their head coach, Ken Clay, making the picks for them, kind of the de facto GM after Natalie Darwitz was, ousted, removed by the league just a few days ago. Sounds like there was a rift between the coach and the general manager. Sounds like a lot of the players were supporting the head coach, not the GM. Just a fascinating, kind of ugly story. There was fans, I think Rachel's story in today's Star Tribune and on StarTribune.com, talked to a lot of fans who are still mad about Darwitz being out, about how this whole thing played out. I don't know. It's interesting. Like, this league was such a nice story, right? All of it was just all about the attendance, all about the excellent product on the ice, the TV availability, the solid financial backing, the 10-year commitment, like everything up until a week or so ago was just all about everything happening on the ice or the good stuff off the ice. Now you've got this controversy with what happened with Darwitz and this team, how this league is run. It is going to be interesting to see how fans ultimately react to that, whether this gets kind of forgotten at a certain point or if this kind of negative sentiment carries over into next season and beyond. So Rachel and I will talk a lot about that on Wednesday's show, but the draft was Monday. I'm sure they would have loved to have had a little bit of space in between there or not have it in St. Paul where emotions were still pretty hot, but You don't get to pick that, and it made for interesting reading and writing, so check that out in today's Star Tribune and StarTribune.com. Let's talk a little Gopher football today with Randy Johnson, covers the Gopher football team for the Star Tribune. Randy, how are you?
Oh, very good, Mike.
Are you making a summer splash personally?
Well, let's see here. I got to find a body of water to do that. Maybe
Right.
coming up because I got some vacation coming up. But yeah, so far my splash has been to get up to North Dakota to see some family. That's
Okay. Well, the Gophers have their own version of what they call Summer Splash, which is getting a whole bunch of recruits into Dinkytown and the surrounding areas this past weekend and then next weekend, right?
Yeah, it goes over 2 weekends. There's times where it might stretch over 3 if PJ has some guys that couldn't make the first 2 weekends. But yeah, usually it's the middle of May, or excuse me, the middle of June, and then the next to last week of June.
What's kind of the benefit of like giving it a name, giving it a label, kind of making it this all kind of happen at one time?
I think it's just a way to promote it, to get more, give it a name, give it a label, give it something that they do a lot of graphic stuff with it. They a lot of social media type things where the recruits will be posting, yeah, I'm taking my official on the Summer Splash weekend, that type of thing, and they actually they do get some summer splashing out of it because they end up on Lake Minnetonka.
There you go.
On a pontoon and jet skis and that type of thing during the situation. Basically, it's to sell the best part of Minnesota, the summers, and that's if you can show them nice weekends, and maybe they're more apt to come here and not think about the winter, even though we didn't have much of one this year.
So what was some of the highlights of the first weekend in terms of, I saw you wrote about it. They had a bunch of key recruits, things like that. What have they kind of landed so far?
Yeah, it started off, they had about 21 recruits on campus starting Friday. And what started out on Friday was the number 2 ranked Minnesota recruit in the state this year, Abu Tarawale of Providence Academy. He gave his commitment to the Gophers even before everybody had arrived for the weekend. So, and then Saturday, they had all their meets and greets and events and things like that. And then Sunday morning, the commitment started rolling in. They got 6 of them on Sunday. Probably the top one would be this a wide receiver, a 4-star wide receiver out of Naples, Florida, Bradley and Martino. That might be the key get that they had on Sunday. They also got 3 offensive linemen, a defensive lineman, a linebacker. So they're filling some needs there. I think what you're seeing too is the impact that defensive line coach Winston Delata-Badair is a guy with just a ton of energy and really relates to these kids. What he's doing for that defense.
Well, those position coaches, we tend to focus on Fleck, PJ Fleck, as far as recruiting goes, but that can be pretty important. You got to have those secondary characters that, these are the guys that are going to be spending more time with these players than the head coach in a lot of cases. Like the head coach is the face of the program, but if those assistants, like you just said, can establish those relationships, that's almost, as important, if not more important sometimes in the recruiting process, right?
Well, yeah, definitely. I'd say so there. I mean, basically it's, if you look at it as a supervisor for you, he's right. The employee, he's your immediate boss. And then obviously you go up the chain a little bit with say a coordinator and then PJ at the top. But yeah, it's very important to have a good relationship with that position coach.
You make the employee analogy. It's more like that now that they can pay them to a certain degree.
Very much so.
What do we? Any kind of early chatter, early thoughts on just kind of the impact of all these? Again, an off season, a lot of rapid fire rule changes, and the paying of athletes and things like that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm curious to see what NIL still how that's going to be involved in this. I'm sure it still will be because players can make their own deals also.
Right.
The funny anecdote from over the weekend on Twitter, on X, there was somebody put a tweet at the University of Texas, lined up on the way into the football facility as recruits came in were about a half dozen or so Lamborghinis in white and burnt orange, and I guess that was giving them a little bit of a message on what they might be able to drive when they
oh my goodness
sign with the Longhorns.
That's that might be an enticement to some people.
Now it's legal, right? NIL.
It's legal. There you go. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that impacts the University of Minnesota. I think Chip Scoggins wrote about that recently, just kind of like where this is all headed, and nobody exactly knows because this is such uncharted territory. But it does feel like the Gophers aren't getting left behind, at least in this recruiting game. They got the 4-star. They're getting some of the better players out of Minnesota, which I don't know if that's kind of keeping up or if it's accelerating or what it is, but it feels like they're in a pretty good place right now with how they've been able to recruit. How do you kind of see the big picture of how they've been able to recruit?
First of all, their big thing was with NIL was retaining their best players. You saw a guy like Darius Taylor, who obviously several programs would love to have a running back like that who's so productive as a true freshman last year, but they kept him. That's been their priority, but it's you'll see players when they get on campus, then they say that you'll have a chance to get some NIL situations, and you're starting to see that when players report, and the ones your highly regarded ones will probably have those opportunities a little bit earlier than others.
What else should we look for, in Summer Splash weekend part 2, kind of before they probably gets a little quiet after that, right? Or does it just does the off season just never end?
Oh, it does get quieter after that. That's when the coaches will have a little bit of time off. But then, it'll ramp up in July. You have, the 23rd to the 25th this year in Indianapolis, the Big Ten Media Days, where every team will be there with their head coach and usually 3 or 4 players. And then with the Gophers starting the season late August, they'll be starting training camp that following week after that Big Ten Media Days, so first week of August. So it's getting here quicker than it feels. It's already the 10th of June here as we're recording this, and that's not a month and a half away. We're a little over a month and a half from training camp.
Would you anticipate, obviously probably a few more signings off of this next weekend of Summer Splash? Are they targeting anything in particular right now, or is this just like, offers are out and the best recruits come in?
Yeah, offers out, best recruits come in. I know they have a couple of running backs they're looking at. They have a defensive back that they're in pretty good on. I think it's going to be, they're going to have roughly 12 players on campus this weekend. So a little over 30 over the 2 weeks. Just waiting to see who commits, and they're at 18 commitments for this 2025 class. That's I would look for them to be in the low 20s, 22, 23, and it's changed a little bit now with the transfer portal.
Of course,
you don't go quite as heavy on the high school players. It's close, but not. You might not have 25 every year. You might have a little bit less than that. You
intentionally save space for some of those transfers, and just understand that there's gonna be that kind of attrition, and you're gonna want to have places for them to come in. Like guys like Max Brosmer, you got to have space for him, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's always going to be some churn. I think people are starting to realize now that in the past when somebody transferred out, it's like, oh, what's wrong? What why is this kid leaving? Well, it's like it's more and more now. It's kids want to play right away, and if they're in a place a couple years and it doesn't look like they're going to be seeing the field, they'll try to find a different place where they can play.
Yeah, and I can imagine, especially at quarterback, the roster management is just so much different now at the college level. I mean, you always used to recruit a bunch, and then it kind of sorts itself out. But when you've got such a emphasis, especially in the Big Ten, and especially now the Gophers seem to be shifting that way on older, more experienced transfers coming in, that's got to shift some of how quarterback gets managed.
Yeah, definitely, and you've seen it this year with PJ Fleck. They tried Ethan Kelliak-Mass, a redshirt freshman last year, and then basically just didn't have didn't have the productivity they wanted. And when you miss on a QB, it'll set you back a bit. But with the portal, you do have a chance to right the ship a little bit here with if you get the right person in. And they're obviously hoping that Max Brosmer is that guy.
You spent tons of time with him. I think we had just talked last time for an episode after you had been down in the Georgia area visiting with him, and that story obviously subsequently came out. You spent a little bit more time too with another key recruit, Coy Parrish, recently. What was that? What was that like? He's incoming and obviously highly regarded.
Yeah, he was the big get that PJ Fleck and his safeties coach Danny Collins got in the offseason. And out of ESCO, that was a situation where Ohio State and USC, Florida State, teams like that were in deep on them late. Brian Day, Ohio State's coach, was up at ESCO the weekend before Coy made his decision. So it was, it was stressful for him, he says, but it was very educational too. He arrived on campus last week. He had a chance to talk to him, and our photographer takes some shots of him as he's moving into his apartment.
Yeah, it's fun.
So kind of a fun little story. Get to know these guys a little bit. He unfortunately for Coy, he one of his reasons for staying and completing his school, not enrolling early, is he wanted to go after a state championship with his teammates in track and everything. He had a hamstring injury, and it caused him not to be able to compete in the state meet. So that was kind of a downer for him. But he wants to get that injury taken care of, and so he can hit the ground running during football season here.
Is that healed up, or any kind of in tandem with the idea of not enrolling early? Is there kind of a longer? I mean, he's a true freshman, obviously, but being the kind of recruit he is, you kind of wonder how soon you might see him. Is there a longer timeline on him just because of those factors?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I mean, I think his talent will jump out pretty quickly. You want to make sure that injury is taken care of, obviously. I think he'll be fine by the time camp rolls around.
Is he the kind of guy that you could see on the field as a true freshman, I guess? Is that fair, or how do you just kind of wait and see?
It's quite the jump from ESCO to the Big Ten. He has the type of talents and skills that you'd like to see the ball in his hands, maybe looking at punt returns, things like that. As for playing defense, well, he'll have a chance to show what he can do during training camp. I'd be a little surprised if he's starting right away, but they got him here. They'll want to use him. I don't think they're gonna, wait around on him. It just depends on how quick a study he is in grasping everything on defense.
Well, maybe that's a good kind of final thought then. Like, are coaches less inclined to kind of stash guys away or worry about burning the redshirt year in this era where guys go out, transfer out more readily?
I would say that's could be true for certain positions, some of the skill positions where, like a running back can get on the field and make a difference right away. You might not want to redshirt him then, because then if they get impatient,
all right.
You saw with Bucky Irving and Kai Thomas that I'm sure that when they transferred out, I'm sure they felt that they were going to be behind Mo Ibrahim.
Yeah.
That following year. So, they both had, pretty good talent and they gave it a shot somewhere else. I think if you look at, say, your offensive linemen, seems like they always need that redshirt year to get some more weight and strength on them, get them bigger, get them to know the system a lot better. Same to a point with defensive linemen. it might be more position sensitive, I guess, in that sense.
That's interesting. It just feels like everything, you got to think about these things differently now, right? You got to think about recruiting differently. You got to think about how just roster management feels so different than it used to be in terms of how you put it together, who plays when, managing relationships, managing just all those things. It's just the nuance changes with the portal, with NIL, things like that.
Yeah, coaches it seems like they have to re-recruit their players sometimes.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
You want to be in constant contact with them and, give them attention, let them, know what's going through their heads. I mean, you don't want to stay away from a guy per se.
You don't want any surprises. You don't want any surprises with your roster. That is for sure. Well, we'll see if there's any good or bad surprises, or if it's just kind of a status quo weekend where they add a few recruits with this summer splash coming up, and already some success with the guys they brought in already. Randy, appreciate it. Get through this next stretch. Hopefully you get some time off when they do as well, and maybe we'll talk to you again in late July.
Sounds good, Mike. Appreciate it.
Good stuff from Randy, one of the busiest guys on our staff. Had a full weekend of recruiting coverage, but also has been helping out with the PWHL Minnesota coverage. He was part of the draft coverage again Monday night, so you can read some of his work in the Star Tribune, StarTribune.com as well. Interesting time for Gopher football. I think they're getting some pretty big recruits right now, but it's just college football, college sports in general are in such a strange place as we sort out NIL, transfer portal. Now the new rule that lets, the NCAA settling lawsuits for billions of dollars, paying players now, things like that, paying players in the past and now going to pay them in the future, in the present. I don't know where this is all headed, but it's an interesting time for college sports. All they can do is adapt, try to get the best players they can, and go from there. Let us finish with the cooler. Like I said at the jump, never too early to start thinking about the NBA draft. And actually, it's probably kind of late, given when we usually start thinking about the NBA draft in Timberwolves land, when they make a deep playoff run, which they don't usually do. This is the furthest they've gone in 20 years, going to the Western Conference Finals. Only the second time in franchise history they've even gone that far. The season kind of gets long, right? Like they were done. They weren't done until late May, early June, and now all of a sudden here you've got the draft coming up now in just a couple weeks. ESPN piece caught my eye. Has kind of like a look at who all the teams in the first round might target with their picks. Wolves have the 27th pick, kind of in that interesting position, right? Like you used to look at teams like the Spurs, and I think the Nuggets are kind of in that spot now, like teams that are perennially drafting in the mid-20s or above because they're that good, because their record is that good, they're making deep playoff runs, things like that. They kind of sit back and watch how the board unfolds. They don't necessarily need to take big swings. They can kind of look, draft for need, but also draft for potential, things like that, figure out what they want and what they need. ESPN has targeted what I think is the right thing. Both of their writers think the Wolves will go after a point guard, although they pick different point guards. Jonathan Givney says Wolves should go after Juan Nunez. He's a international point guard, plays in Germany. Says it has the dimensions of closer to a wing, so he's a bigger point guard, but he's one of the best passers in the class, a great pick and roll guy, and has a lot of creativity to his game. Could draft him, maybe make him the eventual successor to Mike Conley Jr. if you think he's going to be that good, or at least a high-caliber backup who can run the second unit. Same with the other option they see right there, Marquette point guard Tyler Kolek. He's a little older. He's 23. Long career at Marquette, but he could be a good get for the Wolves as well. He's not, maybe not the most dynamic point guard, but he could be a quality backup who could slot in there and give them good minutes. So it kind of depends on what the Wolves are looking for. Are they looking for another kind of like blue chip, kind of like guy to stash away and hopefully become potentially a star later, or are they looking to draft more for need, like immediate need, rotation player, things like that? Or will they eventually, end up packaging this pick, the 27th pick and the 37th pick, in a draft night trade, like a draft and trade kind of thing, to get a veteran, maybe a younger veteran who can be in that rotation? I don't know. I think they've got needs right now, though. We've talked about the needs. We have identified them. Need a running mate for Anthony Edwards in that backcourt. Somebody younger, somebody who can get his own shot, somebody who can create a little bit more of an injection into either that second unit or eventually that starting lineup, guy who can make some shots, things like that. I don't know if you're going to get that at 27 or 37, but you could at least get a piece there that can help you down the road. So we're only almost 2 weeks away from the draft, so time to start thinking about that. Maybe the Wolves go point guard there. Maybe they go for best player available. Maybe they make a trade. We will see, but I like the idea of a point guard at that spot. That will do it for me today. Like I said, Rachel Blount will join me on tomorrow's show. Until then, I am Michael Rand. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. Back at it again tomorrow.